Okay, so some of my jokes that were intended to embarrass Jim, I'll say them anyway, and just know he would have taken it in stride. So Jim's bio is in the packet, and if you want relevant information, you should look there. I'll just add that he's on the National Biodefense Study Panel, and if you want to go to their meeting next week in DC, you can still register. If you mention me, it's free. If you don't mention me, it's free. Jim's from Pennsylvania. He graduated from Dickinson College in 1977 with a degree in sociology, so he's a do-gooder. And before becoming CEO of BIO, he was in the Pennsylvania House, the Pennsylvania Senate, and the U.S. Congress. He became a Republican the way most of us picked our initial party affiliations. He was dating somebody whose father was in the General Assembly, and hanging out meant hanging flyers. So, in politics, he represented the North Philly, West Trenton, New Jersey area, including where George Washington crossed the Delaware River, for the history buffs. And for years, he was a Christmas Day reenactor of the crossing of the Delaware River. He ultimately, I guess, decided out there in the silent cold of the Delaware River that noticed that there weren't any birds around, that they were smarter than he was, so he put down his musket, picked up binoculars, became a birder, and later joined the National Audubon Society Board. He's always been deeply interested in children's issues. As a young man, he was a residential assistant to a house of intellectually and emotionally challenged boys with adaptive functional issues. In Congress, he fought and encouraged pharmaceutical companies to test and make available drugs for children. A couple of stories, since I have extra time, I want to add this, because Nancy Snowden talked about doing stuff that ultimately related to her father's medical condition. Sam talked about medical issues, kind of waking him up, re-inspiring him. One of the things that Jim Greenwood did when he was in the Pennsylvania legislature was, one of his constituents had an accident, gone to a hospital, there wasn't an organized trauma situation, and the medical condition didn't get the treatment that it should have gotten at the time. And so he kind of took the yoke upon himself to get the trauma centers in Pennsylvania organized in a way that made medical sense. And then 5 years after that, his son had a car accident, and they took him, where do you take him? They took him to a trauma center because they'd organized the assets through the work he had done. It saved his son's life. And so talking about, relieving pain or being energized to do something besides just business in this space, I think he's a spokesperson for that as well. In Congress, Jim was also involved in the oversight of nuclear power plants. I warned him that if he sees our next speaker, the governor make a beeline towards him, that it's probably because he wants to talk about protecting children from criminal domestic violence, which Governor McMaster's has done for decades. But I also warned him that it might be because he wants to sell him a nuclear power plant. Either way, I told him that Governor McMaster's would be easy to identify because he'd be the only other gray-haired man in the room who still parts his hair in the middle. So with that, here is a video of more relevant information about Jim Greenwood.
So I think we should start in this sort of discussion, asking what is science?
At ATAR, we're focused on new pathways in immunology.
At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is to manipulate the DNA to basically provide a fix. That's a case where we say you have a broken gene, we put it into, in this case, your stem cells, we give it back to you, and it goes to your bone marrow, and then it gets produced.
Primary focus of cognition has been on novel compounds to treat neurodegenerative diseases, and particularly we focused on Alzheimer's disease.
At Editas Medicine, we are working on what's called genome editing, and the particular technology that we work on is called CRISPR, and it's fascinating because it's a pretty young technology.
We're really interested in is can we use fewer or in many cases no opioids to control post-surgical pain.
We are famous for zinc finger gene editing, but we're expanding what we do to include both gene editing, gene therapy, cell therapy.
Specifically, Sutro is working on antibody-drug conjugates, which are a combination of a targeting agent and antibody that goes specifically to a tumor cell with a toxin that is attached to it. It's kind of a smart bomb for cancer therapy.
In San Diego, we're going to have something like 17,000 of the smartest scientists and entrepreneurs from all over the world who are going to be talking about and unveiling some of the most exciting breakthroughs in biotechnology.
There is a growing amount of evidence that the operating room is the gateway to the opioid epidemic. If you could make a local anesthetic last longer, that would be a huge advance in patient care.
Our primary approach right now is looking at a novel small molecule that we believe can impact one of the key causative agents of Alzheimer's, something called A-beta oligomer. And if that works the way we think it works, we believe we can help restore learning and memory to patients who are declining due to Alzheimer's disease.
You can have mistakes in DNA that lead to really serious diseases, genetically driven diseases. CRISPR is a tool that lets you go in and repair those genes, repair the broken genes at the level of DNA.
From our perspective, a breakthrough is something that has a meaningful difference to patients.
I think the theme of breakthroughs is important. The theme of innovation is even more important in that context.
A breakthrough is in the eye of the beholder, and a breakthrough isn't just one piece. So this year we'll be the first company to do in vivo gene editing. We will put a new gene into somebody's liver.
Scientifically, we're on the cusp of really some great breakthroughs in cancer, and there are a number of other scientific advances that are really coming to the forefront in 2017.
For me, a breakthrough at the end of the day is a product on the market that cures people or makes their life better.
I think the biotechnology community is incredibly optimistic right now. We know we're on the verge of all kinds of breakthroughs.
Every day and every week, there's something that comes up where we look at one another and we say, well, nobody's ever done that before. So not just have we not done it, nobody's ever done it.
You're doing something no one's done before against all the odds, and your hope, your expectation is success.
If this works, this is one of those holy cow moments.
We are at the dawn, not high noon, but the dawn of a whole era of medicine.
At the same time, we're worried. We're worried about what Congress and the President could do in terms of bad policy.
The BIO International Convention is the one place where the entire industry gets together to meet once a year.
And all of a sudden, the whole field of biotechnology explodes because you have brilliant people talking to other brilliant people.
And this is a constantly changing industry. If you're not there, you really don't know what the greatest and latest advances are.
The Bio Convention is a place where you can see all of the aspects of biotechnology at once and how much it impacts every aspect of our lives, and will continue to.
One cannot succeed on one's own. You have to partner, and it's almost creating the right ecosystems.
To potentially inking a partnership that could help your company.
Whether we're government affairs, or we're business development, or we're patient advocacy, there's a tremendous amount of interactions where we can go and we can engage and learn.
I think BIO helps us all get together and understand all of those kinds of things and makes it possible, actually, because we learn how to fund, we learn how to lean on each other to get through certain problems.
Every year we try to get very exciting speakers to our convention, and this year I'll be interviewing David Cameron, the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. We're also excited to have Ann Romney, the wife of Mitt Romney, who suffers from multiple sclerosis.
If biotechnology is important to you, you need to be at the Bio Conference in San Diego.
You could say that the purpose of science is to make order prevail.
This is the future of science in our lives.
To make good prevail over evil.
I think we contribute enormously to the benefit of mankind. We can make a fundamental difference.
To make life prevail over death.
Maybe 5 or 10 years from now, this company will have played some role in helping other people not to have to face Alzheimer's disease.
So I think that deserves a wow. That, yeah. I was in San Diego for Bio International back in June, and I saw that for the first time. And it, I guess one of the great acid tests when you're watching something like that is if the hair stands up on the back of your neck. That's a good thing. And so that video, for me, reminds us why we're in this business. And we didn't have the opportunity with the agenda this year, the way we set it up, to have what I'll call the patient moment. To tell those patient stories, and that this business ultimately is about relieving suffering. So it's great to get inspired with all of that. Ladies and gentlemen, Jim Greenwood.
Boycott American Airlines.
Well, I'll tell you, what we're going to go for is quality over quantity
Talk
today.
fast.
But, you know, taking a deep breath, we're thrilled you're here.
Thank
it
you.
means a lot.
Glad to be here.
We're called South Carolina BIO for a reason. Your brand is embedded in our brand. We're a state affiliate. And, you know, to have the president, CEO make time, we're one of your 50 states. So I think it is the symbolic importance of this during a very transformational year for us at SCbio means a lot. And we know you went to a lot of trouble. So airlines aside, we're going to enjoy the next 15 minutes.
All right. Thanks for having me.
You out.
Thanks for all the great work you guys
Absolutely.
are doing.
Well, you were beautifully introduced, by the way,
Okay.
by a fellow attorney, so he strung it out pretty good. The audience got a chance to see the video, which is incredible, and I think reminds all of us why we're in this. I wanted to start, before we get into a couple of interesting federal policy issues and some of what other states are doing, and just kind of ask you, Jim, talk a little bit about the vision of BIO and your leadership role of BIO and kind of its global reach. I think a lot of our stakeholders don't necessarily understand the global impact that the organization has, and I would say South Carolina is depending on our global reach to happen through you.
Sure. Well, thank you. So the mission of BIO is to do everything we can to accelerate, support biotechnological innovation, mostly in the U.S., but we have membership from 35 other countries. So we really are a global organization, and we have conferences twice a year in Europe, one in China, one in Japan, South America, and so we're extending our reach all over the world. To make it brief, everybody in the world, every governor I've ever talked to, every member of Congress, every leader of another nation, they all say at this stage in the game, we love biotechnology. We want to be a biotechnology hub. We want all those jobs. We want all the benefits of healthcare that comes from that. But many of them, your governor excluded, are schizophrenic about it. Because what they want is they want all of that when they have their commerce hat on, but when they have their paying for healthcare hat on, then they want to impose price controls and all kinds of things that are inimical to innovation. Our innovation is different than almost any other kind of sector. In that, if you invent a better mousetrap today and patent it, you can sell it tomorrow. All right? So if you patent a molecule that's going to cure Alzheimer's disease, you have 12 years and probably $1 billion or $2 billion ahead of you. And all of that time, you have to rely upon investors who are willing to take a risk. Because as you know, 90% of our companies fail before they ever get a product to the market, and 90% of clinical trials fail. So the basic economics of that is high risk, high reward. And so if the biggest problem we face is all over the place, certainly in Washington right now, coming from the president, coming from members of Congress, complaints about the price of drugs and their interest in the short run and trying to get them down. And so we have to defend against, that's our primary problem right now against which we have to defend.
Powerful words, and I think a lot of the topics this morning have been around the conundrum, the broken healthcare system, and how this industry is going to have to deliver innovations to help fix it. Let's go a little deeper on what you were just talking about relative to President Trump. I mean, where do you think his head really is right now on our industry's issues, when I know in a recent cabinet meeting even, he made it clear, he said drug companies are getting away with murder on the pricing.
Well, that poses the question, where is the president's head on anything at any given moment? But the reality is, during the course of the campaign, Hillary Clinton took advantage of the very popular idea of bashing pharmaceutical companies. Bernie Sanders did the same thing, and the president is a populist, and he picked up that theme as well. Unfortunately, in his very first press conference, he said, pharmaceutical companies are getting away with murder. We're going to bring prices way down low. We pay more than the rest of the world. I'm going to fix all that. Unfortunately, what he didn't understand is how the whole thing works. So for instance, he said, Medicare is the biggest purchaser of drugs in the world, and yet we don't, as he said, put it out to bid. Well, what he didn't understand, and we're trying to help him understand, is that I was in Congress when we created the Part D program, and it was designed to be administered by private insurers. And all of those private insurance companies then negotiate like crazy with all of the drug manufacturers to get low prices. So in fact, prices in the Medicare program are lower than they are outside of the Medicare program. So there are those in Congress who say, let's give the Secretary of Health and Human Services the power to negotiate drugs directly. That saves you nothing because the negotiations are already well in hand. The other thing he said is, and a lot of people say, why do we pay more drugs for drugs in the U.S. than they do in Canada? The same drug in Europe. Well, there's an answer for that. The answer for that is because we're the closest thing left to a free market when it comes to the biopharmaceutical industry. We pay lots of rebates, we've got all kinds of controls and regulations, but it's close to a free market. And because it's close to a free market, we can attract the investors who know that they have got a shot at getting back their investment. The problem is that, the benefit from that, of course, is that 57% of all of the drugs innovated in the world are innovated here. So we innovate more drugs than the rest of the world combined. And in fact, the drugs that are innovated in Asia and in Europe are essentially innovated for this market. So the benefit we get from all of that is that we have all of the jobs, our people get access to clinical trials sooner, and we lead the world in this. We sell our products in Canada and Europe for lower prices because those are single-payer systems, and they insist upon it. And our companies do the best they can. They know they can make some margin in those places by selling their products there, but it would never be the magnitude of a profit that is necessary to drive the innovation system. So our challenge here is to convey to the President, and I'm meeting with his budget secretary next week again, convey to the President that the solution to this problem is not to try to push our prices down to the rest of the world, because if you do that, innovation dies. And at a moment when we have these incredible opportunities with immunotherapies and gene editing and all of the galloping science, to shut it down now for the short-sighted view of cheap prices in the short term would be a crime.
Let me stay inside the Beltway in D.C. for just one more question, and I think it relates to what you're talking about right now in terms of leadership. So Health Human Services Secretary Tom Price was a very strong, known supporter of our industry, and with his resignation, with the failure of repeal and replace, what do you think we can expect on healthcare personnel and policy going forward?
Well, there's some names floating around for Secretary, to replace Secretary Price. Scott Gottlieb, who is our FDA commissioner and is a fabulous guy and doing a fabulous job there, his name popped up. I think he's decided to stay at FDA. The name of Alex Azar came up. None of you have heard of him, but he was with Lilly and he used to be on our board. If he were nominated and made HHS secretary, it would be fabulous for our industry. I'm not sure that because he comes out of industry, the pharmaceutical industry, I'm not sure that the administration wants to take the heat that would be generated by nominating someone like that. The other possibility is David Shulkin, who's the head of the VA right now, and he would probably be easily confirmed because he's been confirmed a couple of times almost unanimously in the Senate.
Okay, interesting times in
yes.
D.C., and we appreciate having partners at the national level.
No, I think the governor can wait another hour or so. We can just talk.
Hey, listen, I could go all day. You know, that's why I was trying to just decide which of my favorite questions to hit you with there. But I'm going to shift back to South Carolina, even the global platform for a second. You know, we mentioned this morning, this small state of 5 million has the second highest concentration of international investment in the United States. I think only Hawaii has more. So what's happening globally does matter a great deal in South Carolina. Are there any specific opportunities and or challenges in your mind that you see for South Carolina companies doing business in foreign markets?
Well, I wouldn't say anything different for South Carolina companies, but in general, the way our industry tends to look at this, you look at a place like China, and you see huge market opportunities, you know, a billion plus people. And at the same time, there are lots of challenges there. There have been lots of challenges. They have historically not respected intellectual property, which is a disaster for us. They have historically preferred approving products for their domestic companies before they'll approve products for our companies. We go over to China, I go over to China frequently, and we meet with the heads of those officials, the officials of the important people in the government in this regard, and they're making progress. And one of the things that helps them make progress is as the domestic biotech industry continues to grow, well, all of those companies, now they're Chinese companies, they want their intellectual property protected. They want an efficient drug approval system. And so they're pushing and we're pushing, and I think progress is being made, and I think that market will be eventually very lucrative for our companies.
Okay, that's encouraging. And I know you're aware that our conference theme is building the business of life sciences in South Carolina, and we're saying that very deliberately this year. I think it had been kind of an ad hoc process in this state. We readily admitted we did not have a strategic plan per se going forward, and one comment that we've made is we're not trying to be the next Boston, let's say, or West Coast. We feel we have a story to tell, but with your broader view, in terms of scalability, and you look at some of the other up-and-coming states who may be a little more fledgling like us, don't necessarily have all the infrastructure and resources of Boston or San Diego, would you, any advice to us in terms of how you see us fitting in to this?
Well, first off, the fact that your governor is here, the fact that your governor has made this an important issue for the state is excellent. I mean, that does not happen necessarily in all of the states. And in some of the states where you think it should, it doesn't happen. The thing that I always tell places like South Carolina and other states that say we'd like to be a biotech hub, but we know we're not Boston, we know we're not San Francisco or San Diego or even the Research Triangle. I always say this, look, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not like a football team where there's only so many and you have to grab one and bring it here. What we have to learn about science and biology and biotechnology and how to apply it is infinite. You know, there are thousands of diseases for which we have no treatment. So there's an infinite amount of avenues in which to pursue knowledge. You have magnificent universities here. And that's where it all starts. The reason that Boston is Boston, the reason San Francisco is San Francisco in biotech is because of the universities there and the NIH money that went in there. So the basic formula is, you know, you make sure that those universities are doing everything they can to attract NIH grants. You have great researchers working hard and being inventive and creative. Have them be good at tech transfer so they get their products patented and they spin out companies. Do things at the state level to incubate that and help them get SBIR grants so they can work their way through the valley of death. And I think eventually doing that, you build enough critical mass, the venture capitalists get interested, and you're kind of off and running.
Well, you know, most encouraging from that is we couldn't ask for a better segue into what the afternoon holds. With the governor coming on next, the Commerce Department this morning throwing their support behind this industry, understanding this is the fastest growing sector of our innovation economy, and to have our 3 research university presidents sitting together is almost a bit unprecedented, and they will have their own fireside chat this afternoon. So your advice is well taken, and hopefully we'll continue to build on those conversations. What does it mean for South Carolina to be a truly engaged, effective affiliate of BIO? How do we make sure we take advantage of this relationship we have?
One of the things that's great about BIO as opposed to Pharma Capital P, which is a different kind of organization, is that we have affiliates like this. And so we have this very synergistic relationship wherein when you've got an issue in the state of South Carolina and you need help with your legislature or your governor, it doesn't seem to need a lot of help with him, he's on a good path. But we help those states. We'll come down and help you in a lot of ways. We'll talk to you about best practices so you can think about copying laws that have occurred in the other states have accomplished and see if you can get them here in South Carolina. And then the other way it works, of course, is when we've got issues in Washington, we have a lot of them, especially before Congress. I can go into the offices of your delegation, and I know most of them from when I served in Congress, but I can't vote for or against them, and the people in this room can. So when we have an issue, we need you to either come to our fly-in in Washington and talk to your delegation, explain this industry because it's complicated, and talk to your members of Congress when you're here and when they're here on recess. We have a project called Project 535. There are 535 members of Congress, and we're trying to get every one of them to visit a biotech company so we can explain the science, get them excited, and then also talk about the policy that's necessary for them to succeed. There's one other thing I want to do in the very short time we have, is to be involved. I'd like everybody to take out your smartphone right now, if you can, and I want you to text. And I'll leave this with Sam so he can remind you, but I want you to text numeral 4 BIO, 4 BIO, and text it to 52886. Numeral 4 BIO to 52886. And when you do that, you will get a whole set of information that we use in advocacy, the tools that we've put together to make our arguments, and you'll also be part of BIO Action, which means that when we have an issue in front of Congress and we need your help, we will start sending you messages only if you want to and you agree with us, then we'll show you how to set forward those messages and convey your support for the issues and the positions that we take to your congressional delegation. And if you do that, that'll be a big help. We'll succeed in Washington, you'll succeed here, and what that's good for patients, right?
I love it. That's called striking while the iron is hot. And I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Is there anyone out there who would like to quickly pose a question to Mr. Greenwood?
I have a mic.
Okay.
Hold on, let me take the mic.
All right. I'm going to start with Lou Kennedy, and then I know we're going to wrap in the next 5 minutes, but this is good.
Thank you, Lou.
So I'm a generic pharmaceutical manufacturer, and we are constantly inundated with issues with the major drug wholesalers. And of course, you just talked about affordable health care, and the drug wholesalers continue to eat more and more and more of our margins. Mm-hmm. I know that you're biotech necessarily, but have you had any interaction with the major drug wholesalers and any thought on how we might maybe reform that issue as a means to help with healthcare costs?
I think you raised an important point. There's a lot of value taken out of the system by not only the wholesalers, but by the PBMs, the pharmaceutical benefit manufacturers. And it's a tremendous amount of money is sucked out of the system in that way. And it's very hurtful for innovation, particularly the PBMs, because they can be ruthless. If you want your drug on our formulary, then you have to give us this price, and if you don't, we won't put any of your drugs on our formulary. And then they get these huge rebates, and they keep a whole bunch of it. They didn't want Solvaldi for $50,000. They wanted it for $75,000, and then they got to keep $25,000. And the wholesalers will do all kinds of things that suck money out of the system too. I think Congress is starting to look at this. And I think one of these things that might be interesting is Amazon's trying to get into the whole business. And if Amazon gets into the business, it's not clear what will happen, but it will shake the system up, and ultimately that might be advantageous for us.
Great question and answer. One more from the audience, I believe.
Just a quick question, Jim. Thank you for carving out time to be here. Sure. You're ready to get wheels up. I'm just curious, over the many years, what a paradigm shift from pharma to bio. And we all can remember when pharma was truly the gorilla in the room, and it's shifted. And a lot of that's a testimony to what you've done and others have done. But I'm curious, are there a couple of quick lessons learned from what pharma has done right or not done right that we can keep in mind so that we don't, slip up at some point down the road when we're even more successful?
Sure. I'll give you an example. When I first came to bio almost 13 years ago, the whole issue of biosimilars was taboo. Bio then, and the big companies, the big biologic manufacturers, said, we don't ever want to see any biosimilars legislation because that brings competition. And all of the heads of the Washington offices of the companies were telling me I shouldn't negotiate for biosimilars legislation. I said, this is what Big Pharma did when generics came out. They said, oh, you can't make generics, you'll kill everybody, it's bad stuff. And they were wrong. And they lost their credibility for a long time, and they still have to recover from that. So I went to my board, I said, this is a mistake. We should be for biosimilars. Yes, it creates competition. Competition is good for innovation, but we should not be dragged into it. We should be the lead advocate for it. And so we were. And I went and I actually pushed Congress to do this. But because we didn't get dragged to the table, we had a seat at the table. Because we had a seat at the table, we were able to say the one thing that's really important is we have to have 12 years of data exclusivity. And if we don't have 12 years of data exclusivity, there won't be enough time to recover the cost of developing biologics, and the whole future of biotechnology could be at stake. Because we were honest, because we were credible, we won that debate. And I think that's, when I applied for this job, the search committee said, what do you think? You've been in Congress, you've been in the state legislature. What is your lesson to us about how to advocate for our policy? And I said, it's real simple. The truth, the truth, and the truth. And I think for our industry to continue to do well, we have to be honest. We have to be honest about finding solutions to problems and be part of the solution, not the problem.
Cannot finish with a stronger statement than that. And Jim, it may have been quick, but it was meaningful and compelling, and I know this is just the start of a relationship that's going to continue to deepen. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause to
Thank you.
Jim Greenwood. Thank you so much. Introduce you to the president.
And I'll be back next year. We'll have a whole hour for it. How's that?